Okay, folks, we're going to be ambitious today. We're going to get through 2 chapters because we got some more extra work. I'm going to be busy for the next couple of days here, so we're going to crack on here with this work here. So, chapter 13, Reichskriegsflagge. I took the Reichsflagge district groups disbanded by Captain Heiss under my leadership on 7 October and renamed them Reichskriegsflagge, RKF, Reich War Flag. Now I had command of Reichsflagge South Bavaria. On 11 October, RKF Augsburg was founded. Its leader, Kunans, placed his organization at my disposal. At the same evening, I was with Hermann Esser at NSDAP Augsburg. At Memmingen, the active pan-German Bauerle, and at Schlesheim, my loyal Gartner, headed well-trained, reliable units. On 12 October, the former Reichsflagge unit held its first parade as RKF. This once small body had now been developed by me into a strong formation of over 300 men. Through the most careful selection procedures and strict military training, I had created a well-disciplined and powerful force which offered me unconditional loyalty. For me, it was like old times in the field as company commander. One for all and all for one. These men came from all walks of life. The student and worker beside the salesman. The young Reichswehr recruit beside the long-serving officer of the Royal Army. At the brigade's meeting, serious business prevailed. There was no joking or fooling about. The soldiers of the RKF, officers and men, belonged to their leaders, but to their leaders appointed by me in the military manner. Hitler's SA was led by the tireless Lieutenant Karl Ostwald, who worked day and night and was totally loyal to his men as they were to him. In Loscher, the recruiting division had a capable leader particularly interested in the recruiting in the schooling and training of younger entrants. Cavalry Captain Freiherr von Tüngen led HQ division composed principally of officers and older members of the organization. Battery Limbert, which had been formed from Oberland, had a reliable and brave troop of committed men. With pride, I remember the youth of Corps Palatia, almost all in RKF ranks, as a model of soldierly devotion to duty and true comradeship. I mention here specifically young secondary school teacher Binz. Dr. Schramm supported me in many questions of law, and my nephew Robert Lippert belonged to my brigade while he was studying at Munich. I believe no more disciplined volunteer brigade of its spirit and training was possible. Because of disrespect shown to the new Reich colors of black, red, gold on the station forecourt and at the pensions office in Bella-Strasse, members of the brigade were summoned before the justices. Other skirmishes occurred to strengthen the brigade. On German Day in Nuremberg, the brigade, impressed by its order and discipline at the foundation parade of the RKF, I emphasized that it would remain a constituent member of the German Kampfbund with its former esprit de corps. Special service regulations came into effect for the RKF. The RKF were rallied to the black, white, red banner front war veterans of the years of victory, 1914 to 1918, and the youth with the will to fight, welding them together into established brigades. The time of the clubs is over. Today, useful military forces are needed, which will hurry to answer the call to hoist the colors. Oh, sorry. I had let it go. Carry on. Okay. Thus, the RKF regulations dictated its primary task and added, the RKF recognizes no priority of birth, social birth, social rank, station, in life or property. All German men who are ready to risk their lives unreservedly for its aims may enter its ranks. The members were called upon almost daily to attend parades. They trained and exercised under great pressure. Everybody was waiting for the day. On 17 October, I attempted to interest His Majesty the King in the efforts of the Kampfbund, but he favored the attitude of Captain Heiss and the measures of Carr, whom he identified as his state governor. He would have liked to have seen the Kampfbund decide for Carr. As I have mentioned previously, I believe that His Majesty's accord in Captain Heiss's decision was not without influence. In contrast to Heiss, Dr. Weber, as leader of Oberland, had kept the faith, and in a meeting of leaders on 14 September at which Hitler spoke, pledged loyalty of his brigade to the struggle. The same day in Nuremberg, the NSDAP leaders gathered and swore a pledge of loyalty to Hitler. The German university circle, which had been joined by more than 100,000 students from all parts of the German language area, made an announcement embracing the stated aims of the German Kampfbund of 1 September. On 19 October, a party was held in the Lohenbraukeller to welcome home Lieutenant Rosbach from 8 months' imprisonment in Leipzig. Really? The strains of the Flaggenlied, the Reich war flag was raised with great enthusiasm in a hall of crowded to overflowing. Rosbach and Goering made resounding speeches. After the celebrations, Hitler and I reviewed the march past of RKF in Blaine-Stase. A few days later, I visited comrades Oswald, Bray, and Krupp von Bohlen-Holbach at the Landsberg/Lech hospital. All three had been seriously injured in a road accident on the way to the RKF recruiting drive at Memmingen. Captain Seidel had attended talks in Berlin on behalf of the Kampfbund, on where the North German fighting brigades were attempting to federate as we had done in Munich. Excellency von Bülow took over the leadership of the brigades there. On 18 October, Lieutenant Colonel Kriebel laid a wreath on the tomb of King Ludwig III in the Frauenkirche on behalf of the Kampfbund, and attended the memorial service with officers of the fighting brigades at the Theaterhofkirche. Okay, Chapter 14. Signs of a Storm. Autumn had come to Germany. The plight of the people had worsened. The menacing specter of unemployment, hunger, and despair beckoned for winter. Bitterness and emotion grew daily in all levels of society. Everybody sensed that sooner or later the powder keg would go off. The Reich government was faced with difficult decisions. At Aachen, the Republic of the Rhine had been declared. Bolshevism had built a platform for itself in Saxony under its Marxist president Ziegner. The Reich sent Reichswehr forces to Württemberg, to Saxony, under Lieutenant General von Müller, to restore the constitution. The Bavarian government broke off diplomatic relations with Saxony and installed a border protection force on its northern frontier under Captain Erhardt. The purpose of this measure could be none other than to cloak the sending of troops for the battle against Berlin. Since the Bavarian police were easily able to repel any expected intrusions into North Bavaria by the Reds, the call to special armed brigades coincided with the declarations of a state of threatened war with the Reich. Commissioner General von Kahr represented the sovereignty of the Reich in nearly all areas. He had repealed the law of protection of the Republic and forbade the execution of arrest warrants issued for Captain Erhardt, Captain Heiss, and Lieutenant Rosbach. The jurisdiction of Reich Justice of Bavaria was therefore abolished. The cause of this total break of Bavaria from the Reich was the following. The NSDAP newspaper Völkischer Beobachter had attacked Gessler and Seekt in an article, as a result of which Berlin ordered General von Lossow, who from the point of view of the Reich held power to command the army in Bavaria, to ban the newspaper. Carr opposed the order, and when Lossow declared that he could not act contrary to his superior Carr, he was ordered to shut down the newspaper using force of arms. When he refused to do this, the Reich government relieved him of his command. Reichswehr Minister Dr. Gessler went to Augsburg and ordered Major General Freiherr von Kress, whom he had in mind to succeed Lossow, to take command of the 7th Bavarian Division. The Bavarian government responded to the measure by declaring the Bavarian section of the Reich Army to be the trustee of the German Volk. Instead, General von Lossow as state military governor and appointed him commander of the 7th Division. This withdrew the Bavarian Reichswehr from the Reich command structure and placed it exclusively under the command of Carr. It may strike the reader that we nationalists were not wholeheartedly behind Carr's measures, since they were dispensed with the Reich sovereignty over Bavaria and Reich President Eber as military commander-in-chief, but they were in line with our oft-repeated demands. Additionally, protagonists of our ideas were now protected against the intervention of the state court for the protection of the Republic, although the real reason was Carr's support for the central organization of the NSDAP. Without question, we nationalists would have hailed this break and had been able to support it had we been convinced that Carr would now unfurl the black, white, red flag in Bavaria and call out to the nationalists in all Germany, "Gaue, Germany is our camp." It was by the German and not the Bavarian factor that the Kampfbund measured Carr. In his call, Carr was probably trying to play a German tune. At the same time that the entire ministry made an appeal to the Bavarian Volk, which placed Bavarian demands at the forefront. From here, blessings could flood across all Germany if the struggle were for Germany's welfare alone, and the sole aim was the guideline for the action. And if the Bavarian government were the trustee of the German Volk in deeds and not just in words, the term trustee was a very in word of the time. If this were not the case, then the measure was no more than an army mutiny, since Prussian officers and soldiers at General von Lossow's infantry school were being urged to refuse the orders of the Reichswehr commander-in-chief. I was unable to convince myself that the Bavarian government was motivated exclusively by the German interest in taking over the Reichswehr in Bavaria. And this was the reason why I dissented and fought against the obligation personally. There is no reason to support the assumption that it was General von Lossow's intention to be the leader of the Bavaria's special interests. Certainly, I do not believe so. His immediate subordinates, the commanders of the infantry and artillery, were opposed to the above steps. They were joined by the chief of staff appointed by the Reichswehr minister, but not recognized by General von Lossow and the Prussian general staff officer with whom Berlin had replaced me in Munich. It was the same circle of officers which on 8 November 1923 acted against the coup plan and forced Lossow to comply. As always, Berlin could always wait, and finally it came out on top. On 22 September, the general favored Adolf Hitler with a long conference from which Hitler emerged very satisfied. General von Lossow stated that he was in full agreement with 9 of the 10 points Hitler had made. Lossow's willingness to cooperate in the Volkisch revival was not doubted. We esteemed his dedication and capabilities greatly. On the other hand, Carr's next measures caused the Kampfbund more concern. He halted the shipments of Reich gold reserves from Nuremberg and the payment of Reich taxes to Berlin by the finance offices. As regards the Bavarian Transport Institutions, he ordered that the instructions had precedence over those of the Reich transport authorities. This deprived the Reich of sovereignty in the matter of finance and transport in Bavaria. In contrast to the Bavarian government, Carr announced that he did not approve of the amicable settlement to the Siecht-Lossow falling out, and he ignored the demand of the Reich government on 27 October 1923 to lift the state of emergency. All Carr's edicts, of course, existed only on paper. He declared that he intended to resolve the German question and assured the leaders of the pro-fatherland brigades that he was determined to march on Berlin. The brigades were asked to hold themselves in readiness. It could happen any day. The order of battle for the march had already been determined. The volunteer corps played war games over maps of Berlin. Leaders of the pro-Fatherland movement, especially close to Kahr, Captain Heiss, Professor Bauer, Freiherr von Oflitz, made passionate speeches against Berlin. Bavarian fests were will clean out the Berlin pigsty, and Kahr has lit a slow fuse to the powder keg are just two examples for the growing wealth of this oratory. In order to win over the Kampfbund, which despite everything was still looking on from the sidelines, on 30 September 1923, Kahr had a conversation with the senior Justice Administrative Officer Punner, offering him the post of civil governor of Saxony and Thuringia after the coup, but adding that the mission could take months or years. Colonel von Seisser, appointed by Kahr to go over the details, stated that there was no question of using Kampfbund troops to occupy Thuringia because they would keep on marching. Seisser told his officers that an emergency police force would be set up to free the state police for operations outside the Bavarian frontier. Regarding the relationship between the state police and Mossau and Kahr and the Kampfbund, Seisser remarked that all was agreed except that Hitler could not be pinned down on the timing. Members of the state police were urged repeatedly to join the NSDAP. It was generally known, even in the Reichswehr, that a march on Berlin was in the offing. On 31 October, the district command assembled the leaders of the Völkisch and pro-Fatherland brigades for a conference which Kampfbund leaders also attended. Here, guidelines were established for preparations in common. On 6 November 1923, Lossow declared that he was determined to stage a coup d'etat. Kahr added that there were two routes open, a normal one and an abnormal one. And I concluded, I decide when I am not going to be hurried. I shall intervene if anyone jumps the gun. The Völkisch brigades were ready to march. Hitler informed their ever more impatient followers that he was cooperating with Lossow and Seisser and would not move without their approval. On 26 and 27 October, I held a parade for RKF Munich. On the 30th, I swore in RKF Augsburg, and on 2 November, RKF Munich at the Pioneers Training Hall. In a mass rally on 30 October at Circus Krone, Hitler declared to the thunderous applause of the masses, "For me, the German question will not be resolved until the black red swastika flies above the fortress of Berlin. There is no going back, only forwards. We all feel that the hour has come, and therefore we shall be available and follow orders as does the soldier in the field. Fall in step, German Volk, and forwards march." Negotiations which Kahr had pursued with North German circles for the purpose of creating a national dictatorship caused a shift in the way the Kampfbund viewed the Commissioner General. Additionally, Berlin had begun with talks with representatives of the BVP after Kahr declared he would have no dealings with the Reich government. A not considerable portion of the BVP was ready to unite with Berlin and sacrifice Lossow. This was not to be wondered at, for a dictatorship by Kahr was only wanted by the BVP to stem the influence of the Völkisch movement. This fact pushed the Kampfbund closer to Kahr, and in numerous meetings with Lossow and Seisser, the common past and objectives were hammered out. At the beginning of November 1923, they both declared that something must now happen and that they could delay no longer. Seisser wanted to find out the lie of the land in Berlin personally. Lossow agreed to be involved in any coup which had a 51% chance of success. Hitler conveyed to us his impression of these talks that Lossow and Seisser were waiting for the fait accompli, but did not want to set in motion themselves and would rather that Hitler, did it. In November, the coup was expected any day. When our people went on the street in uniform, people stopped them to ask them when it would be underway. The political tension was enormous. The financial situation continued to be hopelessly out of control. Inflation soared to staggering heights. On 23 October 1923, a restaurant meal cost 1 billion marks. Most now yearned feverishly for that liberation, which would also restore the economic health of the nation. On 4 November, Remembrance Day, a plaque was laid at the War Memorial Reichswehr. State police and defense brigades stood before the Army Museum. A gentle tremble seemed to course through all the ranks, the omen of a great decision. Carr and Seisser were absent. Carr had dispatched Seisser for secret talks in Berlin with Seat, and Carr was holding back to see what Seisser would bring. The state police vehicle sent to fetch General Ludendorff broke down, and so Ludendorff did not appear. Meanwhile, all active and volunteer troops assembled in Marstallstrasse. Before the residence of his forebears, His Majesty the King took the salute in Marstallstrasse alongside General von Lossow and a crowd of generals and officers. Company after company, flag after flag paraded, black, white, red, and the swastika waved proudly in the wind. In good order, the RKF marched past the royal prince of Bavaria. Was this the long for a moment? Do we not take the king into our midst and tell him, fate has placed upon you the duty to lead our struggle? Be our prince and lead us? We shall not rest before Germany is free and happy again. This and similar thoughts moved us officers all the more. So our military leader, Colonel Kriebel, would lead the Kampfbund out before the king. A substantial number of these young men who trod with measured step and enthusiasm before the rightful heir to the throne of Bavaria were from the working class. Even many former communists graced our ranks. So another historic hour neared its end. And nothing happened. The troops and brigades retired to quarters behind the jingling Johnnies of the military bands. The fighting brigades passed before the offices of the Commissioner General, where Kriebel and Hitler stood. The battle songs ebbed, the feverish excitement abated, and gave way to a suppressed burning desire for a solution. Hours passed, hours and days passed. Every day the same question: will today finally bring the decision to march? The sergeants of the fighting brigades demanded action. The Oberland leaders training at the Leash declared that they could no longer hold back their people, and if it lasted any longer, they would go alone. The time was right. Delay could cause unpredictable damage. Conferences went on late into the night. The storm troops exercised the last possible moment. To the last possible moment. Every evening brought parades and maneuvers. 8 November 1923 dawned, the 5th anniversary of the 1918 revolution. 5 years of deprivation and misery for the German people. The first snowflakes of the year drifted down on Munich. If you'll give me a moment, we're going to crack on here through chapter 15, actually. Chapter 15, so just give me a moment. Okay. So chapter 15, November 8th and 9th, 1923. Privy Councillor Zentz issued an invitation to a number of recruiting offices for the pro-Fatherland brigades to attend on the evening of 8 November 1923 at the Bergenbauer Keller. I've said that several times. That's still okay. Where Carr would make a scheduled speech on his policies. Whether this speech as most of his others he had made, built him into a statesman at the Völkische Beobachter, so rightly observed, I have no idea. The Bürgerbrau Keller had been chosen because it was the biggest hall in Munich. But even so, it was not big enough to accommodate everybody who wanted to get in. The events of that remarkable evening are well known and historically verified. I can therefore spare myself the task of going over them again. At 8:45 that evening, Hitler proclaimed the Nationalist Republic. There followed a 1 hour-long conference in a cipher between Hitler, Kahr, Horner, Lossow, and Seisser, to which even General Ludendorff was brought in by Kahr. Meanwhile, in the main hall, the members of the Bavarian government present, headed by President von Nilling, were taken into protective custody. At 9:45, Kahr announced to the assembly the stormy jubilation that he proposed to take upon himself the destiny of Bavaria as governor for the monarchy. Then Hitler announced the composition of the new Bavarian government and the new provisional government. Provisional German Nationalist government. With great emotion, Ludendorff placed himself and his name at the disposal of the German Nationalist government. General von Lossow and Colonel von Seisser promised to reorganize the army and police under the black, white, red flag. In conclusion, Poner stated that he would accept the office of the Bavarian government in the new administration. All declarations were accompanied by unparalleled outbursts of jubilation. Kahr seized Hitler's hand with both of his own, shook it long and firmly, and looked him in the eyes with great emotion. When the 9 men retired to the conference room after the public announcements, Kahr and Poner discussed the need to appoint a new president at once. At 11 o'clock, the night Kahr announced that he had advised the authorities of the new situation by telephone and had asked Poner to bring the press up to date. General von Lossow approached General Ludendorff, came to attention, and said, "The wish of your excellency is my command. I shall organize the army in such a way as your excellency requires." Colonel von Seisser expressed himself in similar terms. During these events in the Burgerbrau Keller, the RKF had gathered for a comradely evening in the Lowenbrau Keller. NSDAP stormtroops led by Lieutenant Bruckner, Oberland Brigades, and Kampfbund Munich under its leader Zeller accepted the RKF invitation, and besides them came numerous friends of the German Kampfbund with its members, and so this hall, too, was packed out. A joyful mood prevailed. From my notes, I see that I made the following address. Comrades and friends of the German Kampfbund, as leader of the Reichskriegsflagge, I extend to you all hearty greetings on this our comradeship evening, to which we have invited you on the anniversary of the 1918 November Revolution. This evening, we exceed the framework of a normal comrades' reunion, at a time in which our vote, and in particular our best forces, live in the most dire need. After 5 years of an unholy revolution, we can no longer go on just being convivial and companionable. Today, we can summon you all on the 5th anniversary of the revolution to comradeship in arms, to the struggle for revenge and for reprisals against the traitors to the people and corrupters of the people. The German Kampfbund is not prepared to stand by any longer and watch the destruction of our fatherland. He will not fight for the sake of fighting. We will want nothing for ourselves. No sinecures, no well-paid jobs, but we are convinced that this great emergency can only be resolved by arms. We must be prepared and willing to take up arms for the liberty and salvation of our fatherland, and risk our whole person and life for the fatherland. Arise in the struggle to free fatherland and true comradeship of all those willing to fight. That is the resolution of the evening of 8 November. My words found an enthusiastic echo. The appeal to fight unleashed joyful accord. It may be a good thing to remind oneself of that at a time in which dull submission has taken over in place of the resolve to fight. After I had spoken, Hermann Esser took the platform as Hitler's representative as political leader. I thanked him especially for coming. He had been in bed for several days with a high fever and returned to bed immediately after making his speech. While he was speaking, I received information pertaining to the events in the Burgerbrau Keller. The announcement provoked endless jubilation. People jumped up from their chairs and hugged each other. Many were crying with joy and supercharged emotion. Reichswehr soldiers ripped off the yellow cockade from their caps. The general rejoicing was so loud that it drowned out the martial music in the hall. Endlich! Finally. That was the word which relieved the tension and which was on everybody's lips. It was difficult to make myself heard and issue orders to my troops. At once I formed up the brigades before the Lowenbrau Keller to march to the Bürgerbrau Keller to acclaim the new government. To storms of applause and cheers on the street, and from the windows we marched behind a military band through Brainerstrasse into the inner city. I still recall a strange man with a black beard and a sinister look who I suddenly found marching at my side. He warned me to watch out for myself. I pushed him aside and lost him in the crowd. In Brainerstrasse, a dispatch writer handed me an order to proceed to the War Ministry and place the RKF there at the disposal of the new government. The NSDAP in Oberland continued to the Bürgerbrau Keller. I occupied the War Ministry with the RKF and his Kampfbundzeller, which had attached itself to my force. The Reichswehr sentries at the front door of the ministry wanted to prevent my entry. With difficulty, my companions Seidel and Oswald, the first to approach the building with me, convinced the sentries to stand aside. The sergeant of the watch in particular was exemplary, never leaving my side until the orderly officer sent him back to the guardroom. The orderly officer that evening was Captain Dosser. His comportment was dignified. I never knew that we did not see eye to eye. He had never attempted to hide it. I always respected him, however, because he was not one of those officers simply there to collect a weekly wage packet. When I entered his office to explain my purpose, he declared that he would not give way, and continued his office duties accordingly at my request. In particular, he took it upon himself to attempt to contact General von Lossow and to answer the questions of his troops. My attempts to speak to Lossow were unsuccessful. Meanwhile, the RKF had occupied the entire War Ministry building. Together with the Reichswehr, the permanent company, Freiherr von Tübingen, was to occupy the telephone exchange and remain at readiness as an honor guard for the commander-in-chief. Battery Lambert alternated watch and sentry duty in equal numbers with the Reichswehr. The SA under Oswald and the Binz detachment were in the building at readiness for special purposes, in groups of Kampfbundzeller held the War Ministry courtyard. In conduct and discipline, the RKF was the equal of a peacetime military unit, of which fact the Reichswehr gave evidence in court later, acknowledging its respect and recognition. No safe or drawer was open, no file disturbed. I set up my command post in the waiting room of the state military governor. Nobody entered General von Lossow's office. The impossibility of reaching him was a serious obstacle to my plans. I intended not to issue any orders to the Reichswehr troops without having spoken to him first. I could not answer the many inquiries from military units, especially from outside Bavaria. Now and again, Lossow was supposed to be coming. Then Seisser. The officers formed an honor guard for Seisser, but nobody came. Towards 11 that night, Hitler arrived at the district command to greet the RKF. When I congratulated him on his success, he embraced me and said it was the finest day of his life. He radiated happiness and joy. Now better times are coming, he said. We all need to work day and night for the goal of saving Germany from despair and humiliation. The joyful, disquieting reports alternated. When I heard that General von Lossow was at the city commandant's office and I still could not reach him by telephone, I went there with Captain Seidel in order to report to the new Reichswehr minister. The gate was barred shut. When I knocked, I was asked for my name and business, but not admitted. This aroused my first suspicions, but I reassured myself that an overzealous, uninformed sentry was responsible. Meanwhile, General Ludendorff, accompanied by Lieutenant Colonel Kriebel, had arrived at the district command to set up a command center. Hitler was also present for the time being. Bonner had gone home. As it got late and Captain Seidel mentioned to General Ludendorff his worries regarding the long absence of General von Lossow, Ludendorff replied sharply, "A German general does not break his word." Very soon after we occupied the district command, the waiting room filled. Officers and officials of the old army came to find out the situation to place themselves at our disposal, or to put their names down for suitable positions. Naturally, only the higher ones. For 0100, a 100-strong force of state police marching to the government building exchanged enthusiastic greetings with the RKF when passing the war ministry. We heard that the entire personnel of the infantry school had marched to the city, led by Lieutenant Rosbach, swastika flags flying, each man wearing a swastika armband. In the pioneer barracks, difficulties seemed to have arisen. Captain von Müller's Oberland battalion had had some unpleasant exchanges with officers of the Reichswehr Pioneer Battalion. General Achter, military leader of Oberland, was therefore asked by the Kampfbund leader to keep order there, and even Hitler agreed to help out in this mission, which was really outside his jurisdiction. Gradually, the waiting room and other district command offices began to empty. Those looking for positions now considered the situation to have changed to unclear. Even more rumors of difficulties were surfacing, which advised caution. As the night came to a close, Ludendorff was still awake in the commandant's office at district command, surrounded by his loyal servants. He wore a worried expression. Nobody could read what was in his mind. From Carr, Lossow, and Seisser, nothing had been heard. None of them could be contacted. In the corridors and waiting rooms, soldiers, the RKF, Reichswehr, and some state police slept shoulder to shoulder. RKF and Reichswehr held the gates jointly. From time to time, I took a nap to unwind. As morning dawned and there was still no clarity about Carr's behavior and that of his colleagues, we sent for Punner. After a short briefing, he decided to go to police HQ. Major Hundlein accompanied him. Zeller with a Kampfbund platoon went along as his personal bodyguard. I summoned the members of the Reichswehr and state police together at district command. My brave valet, Georg Volk, stood with the front rank. I told them that in view of the uncertain situation, I could not keep them with me, and they should return to their respective units. Eyes glistening in distress inwardly, the brave men departed. At the same time, the sergeant of the Reichswehr Guard reported to General Ludendorff. I released him after a few words, recognizing his devotion to duty. By morning, I no longer really doubted there had been some kind of major problem. General Ludendorff and Lieutenant Colonel Kriebel therefore decided to discuss the situation with Hitler at the Burger Brau Keller. I took my leave of Ludendorff, who extended me his hand in parting, and I promised him that I would do my duty. The general was still unable to accept the idea that he had been betrayed, until, as Captain Seidel was escorting him to his car, he said, "Do you really think that a German general can break his word in that way?" Embittered and disgusted at the deception, as were so many others, he now had to head home to where a celebration had been promised. He might easily have swept all difficulties out of his path by retiring from public life, but not for a moment did he consider it. He had declared for the flag of the Volkisch movement, and he remained faithful to the bitter end. I was now alone with the RKF at district command and determined to hold out until relieved. I could not get used to the idea that Lossow, Seisser, and Carr had defected. When the morning papers, especially the Münchner Neue Nachrichten, brought inspired reports of the Volkisch Revolution, I chased away the dark suspicions of the previous night and looked with fresh confidence toward further developments. Then reports came that the Reichswehr and state police were going to advance the war ministry to drive me out. General von Lossow, Colonel Seisser, and Carr were at the infantry barracks. From there, they were mounting a counter-operation. Apparently, Punner and Hundlein had been arrested. I could not and would not believe that Lossow had allowed himself become involved in such intrigue. As my immediate superior, he should simply have had some indication or order sent to me to stand down. Nothing of the kind happened. Since I had also heard nothing from the Burgerbrow killer, I was left to my own devices. My decision was not difficult. I had been ordered here and would not leave my post until ordered. I called the leaders to me and told them to prepare the building for defense. I sent the individual detachments to their positions and instructed them in their tasks. They were not to act unless I ordered it. During the morning, a few officers appeared after a good sleep and having read the morning papers to brief themselves on the situation. Almost all retired quietly. An eager patriot gave me a shocked look when I told him that if he wanted a position, he should join the queue at the infantry barracks. I had no jobs to hand out, although he could have a gun and help out with the shooting when the shooting started if he liked. He left the inhospitable house as rapidly as he came. On the other hand, in another scene, when we were surrounded, two young students from the volunteer corps, Lens, reported to me and asked to assist. I responded that so far as I knew, their leader was not on our side, and that we had a lost cause. At that, they asked to be recruited into the ranks of the RKF to prove their faithfulness to death. What a difference between these two young Germans, and all too many of the others who had filled my waiting rooms the evening before. A gallant, stable hand, Fritz Faller, phoned from the barracks to ask if he should bring the horses for my ride. I laughed it off, although I am sure he would have got through if I needed him. But in view of the current situation, I had to make an exception and go without my morning canter. Towards 11 o'clock, I received the report that at 0740, the Reichswehr had been ordered to retake the district command and had paraded in readiness at 10:30. I ordered my men to occupy the places indicated earlier and emphasized to all my commanders that the Reichswehr was not to be fired upon. The Reichswehr is nationalist and sooner or later will stand shoulder to shoulder with us in the struggle for liberation. I reserved to myself the right to give the order to open fire. I used a system of runners to maintain a swift and sure contact to all the detachments. Gradually, a wide circle of state police and Reichswehr began to form around the district command. Patrols I sent out came upon slowly advancing columns. The force were sent to the War Ministry, held by about 400 RKF men, was as follows: 2nd Battalion, 19th Infantry Regiment. Staff and 1st Company, 2nd Battalion, 20th Regiment. Staff and one more company, 7th Pioneer Battalion, 19th Mortar Company, 4 armored cars, Vehicle Section 7. 5th Company, 7th Artillery Regiment, part of the 2nd Battalion, 7th Artillery Regiment. Nearly all state police in Munich with 4 armored cars, 3 police detachments from Eichstätt, 3 police detachments from Augsburg, 1 police detachment from Landshut, 1 police detachment from Ingolstadt. This assault corps was led by Major General Ritter von Danner. His chief of staff was Lieutenant Colonel Ritter von Sauer. A grim determination could be seen in the expressions of my loyal RKF comrades, faithful to death. Nobody asked questions. There were no doubts and no criticism. They took up their positions and stood their ground without chatter in a soldierly manner. I was overwhelmed by a feeling of absolute confidence in them. At the front of the building, looking out on Ludwigstrasse, machine guns poked out from every window, barbed wire barriers and sentries protected us from Schönfeldstrasse to Ludwigstrasse and the Englischer Garten. I had detachments from around the War Ministry building, in the courtyard, and in the edifice itself. The RKF flag, to which the brigade had sworn allegiance a few days before, was placed by Himmler. First mention of Himmler, at least from what I've seen, behind the barbed wire in Ludwigstrasse. Be honest with you, let me editorialize this for a moment before we continue on here. I bet that's the photo of Heinrich Himmler behind that barbed wire that we see. But it's just, when he was there. I haven't heard any other mention of Heinrich Himmler yet. Very interesting. There's probably that famous picture, though, like I said. Okay. Anyway, to carry on. Beside it stood Seidel, Oswald, Graf du Moulin, I guess you could say, and some dispatch riders. Carr's mouthpiece, the Müncher Zeitung, wrote as follows in its edition of 9/10 November 1923, in which naturally it came out strongly against us in the events at the War Ministry. All Ludwigstrasse was crammed with people, many of whom took to their heels when towards 1 o'clock the troops fired some machine gun bursts. The fighting brigades did not abandon their position. Their leader stood fast, and his comrades sang, "O Deutschland, hoch in Ehren." After that, there was more firing, apparently not at anything in particular, and a second armored car drove through Ludwigstrasse. But those occupying the War Ministry did not leave their posts, not even when they were informed that artillery and mortars were being brought up. Towards 2 o'clock, there were shouts of "Heil!" and it appeared that General von Epp and Captain Rohm had gone into the War Ministry as negotiators. I had ordered no shots to be fired, thus the Reichswehr advanced unmolested as we watched. The artillery brought up a field gun to Schoenfeldstrasse and aimed it at us. Machine guns were installed in a building facing us in Ludwigstrasse, and the mortar company set up on the other side of the road. Our own machine guns threatened them silently from our windows. One order, one whistle would have done it. The able Semmelbauer had disciplined the machine gun detachment well. They would have engaged any target if they had been ordered. Occasionally, I had a notion to do it, but I suppressed it. It must not be. The sentries occupied their posts and the exits calmly. A Reichswehr officer, Major Ritter von Reitzenstein, requested entry into the War Ministry with the observation, "It is unnecessary for you to be here in Berlin. The Turkish government has been called out." Nonchalantly, the escort to the RKF colors, Captain Freiherr von Reitzenstein replied, "Then it is also unnecessary to have borders over there." And added in registration, "You can pass. The veterans of the front, pass each other." When an old lady in the crowd saw the armored car coming up from the Theresienstrasse, she threw herself into the barbed wire, crying, "If these young men had to shoot each other, I do not wish to go on living." A British newspaper reporter requested permission to speak to the real government. When he was told he should go to the infantry barracks, he replied no. He wanted to speak to the real new government, and General Ludendorff, the deposed government, did not interest him. It was lonely around me. The flag fluttered proudly. My friends were close, by stolid and silent, blood brothers unto death. I was less happy about having Kampf and Zeller present, since they were not unconditionally sworn or subordinate to me and lacked thorough training. It was too late to do anything about it now. We were in the same trap and had to put up with it. A twist of fate had placed my long-serving adjutant, Lieutenant Hoffla, as commander of the mortars directly opposite me. How he would resolve the conflict between military duty and his conscience if he received the order to fire, I could only guess. Almost at the same time, at midday, I received a visit from General von Epp, accompanied by Lieutenant Colonel von Horoff and Lieutenant Colonel Hoffmann Horoff. Von Horoff and then Hoffmann. Oh, yeah, Lieutenant Colonel Hoffmann, sorry. Horoff, to whom I was indebted for much in my military life, had hurried to Epp with the intention of urging him to my support with advice and assistance. I was not on particularly good terms with Epp at the time, but he never hesitated to answer the call and came at once. The character of this strange man impressed me greatly that day. I also had a heartfelt attitude for the noble-mindedness of my regimental comrade Horoff. It was suggested I should surrender. I thanked them for their comradely advice, but I could not accept it. I had been ordered here and was determined not to leave without receiving a new order. After Losau had deserted us, there was only one man who could give it, General Ludendorff. Even the objection of General von Epp that from now on I was in a besieged fort and had to negotiate alone did not unsettle me. Ludendorff had left me that morning in the belief that I would hold the district command. No special indication was needed on my part. I had no contact with him, but he had to be able to rely on me. At that moment, Lieutenant Colonel Hoffman arrived as he said, as Lossau's spokesman, and called me. What else do you want? You have already got everything you wanted. A new government is at the helm in Berlin, and all is in good order. No words of friendship or comradeship were brought. As a result of this information, I agreed to a 2-hour truce. With General von Epp, I went to the Reichswehr commander opposite me, Colonel von Flügel. This meeting affected me deeply. Eyes glistening, Flügel offered me his hand. Epp and Flügel guaranteed the armistice. Hoffman, meanwhile, wanted to obtain instructions from Ludendorff. I transferred command of the RKF to Lieutenant Oswald. Captain Seidel and Graf du Moulin accompanied me with General von Epp to the opposing commander, General von Donner, in the state police barracks. Lieutenant Bergen, my regimental comrade, commanding a detachment of Munich State Police, joined our group for friendship's sake. The meeting with General von Donner and his chief of staff, Lieutenant Colonel Sauer, was short and bitter. I had difficulty controlling myself. Donner was unfriendly and cold. To an insulting remark of his, I replied in kind. It may be that he was trying to master his inner emotions by a display of brusqueness. Sauer, leaning against the window, looked at us with the superior expression of the victor. General von Donner had to communicate first with Lossow. While he was doing this, there came an alarming report of events at the Feldherrnhall. Feldherrnhall. Okay. It was alleged that that General von Ludendorff had fallen. The long-practiced reserve of many Reichswehr and state police officers gave way to an outbreak of fury. Yells of indignation and shame coursed through the hall. Officers threw their swords and caps to the ground. Rage and despair gripped the others. Now there would be no peace. I had to return to my troops. Without waiting for a decision from Donner or Lossow, I hurried back to the War Ministry, where I received the shattering report that 2 of my men had paid for their loyalty with their blood. Faust had been hit by a bullet, Casella dying, and was asking to speak to me. Dr. Ketterer, a man of the RKF front line, an exemplary officer and surgeon, gave the mortally wounded Casella what help he could. I was unable to bid him farewell. General von Epp held me back. Captain Wimmer brought the surrender terms. 1. Honorable lowering of the RKF flag. 2. Surrender our weapons to the state police. 3. Honorable surrender of RKF leader Captain Rohm. I was deeply affected by the fate of 2 dear comrades. At this point, however, I must explain that in contrast to the planned use of arms on the Odeonsplatz, the fate of events at the War Ministry seemed to have resulted from a tragic sequence of misunderstandings. Inquiries made by the Reichswehr shortly afterwards by one of my RKF officers revealed the following: Reichswehr Pioneer Company Ville, on the right flank of the 2nd Battalion, 19th Infantry Regiment, in reserve behind the Wall District Command, and which, on the express order of its commander, had its weapons unloaded, allegedly received fire from the district command, which resulted in 2 pioneers being lightly wounded. A burst of machine gun fire from 2nd Battalion /19th in response then killed RKF man Faust, a mortally wounded Lieutenant Casella. pioneers maintained that they were fired upon from a window on the first floor of a building at the rear of the district command, which was higher than the wall. The man who fired from this window wore a yellow wind cheater and yellow cap. Since the pioneers were anything but hostile to the Volkisch brigades, I do not doubt the veracity of the allegation. In the witness statements, the surprising mention of the yellow clothing worn by the shooter is accompanied by matching allegations that he wore the cockade at the front of his cap. He was therefore undoubtedly a member of the so-called Kampfbund Munich. For all members of the RKF wore gray caps and wind cheaters and no cockade, but the black, white, red, and white, blue diagonal stripes on the right and left of the cap. It is therefore not out of the question that an irresponsible individual of Kampfbund Munich decided to go to war by himself, contrary to the strict orders in force, and so caused the tragic events which ensued. It was also very difficult to supervise the members of that brigade. Zeller, its commander, had left with a detachment during the night as protection for Punner. Ooh. You know what? I'm going to call it there. Okay. We're going to finish up chapter 15 here, but I think we have some other things to do. So enjoy the rest of your day, y'all. We're going to try to finish this up hopefully later tonight. See you later.